The Nizari Assassins were a highly secretive and influential sect of Ismaili Shia Islam, active primarily between the 11th and 13th centuries, known for their expertise in espionage, psychological warfare, and targeted assassinations. Unlike conventional armies that engaged in direct warfare, the assassins relied on carefully planned covert operations to eliminate powerful enemies, striking fear into rulers and military leaders across the Middle East. Their operations were primarily based in Persia, modern-day Iran, and Syria, where they established a network of fortified mountain strongholds. The most famous of these was Alamut Castle, a nearly impregnable fortress located in the Elburz Mountains of northern Iran. From these strongholds, the assassins launched operations against some of the most powerful empires of the time, including the Seljuks, the Crusader states, and later the Mongols. Despite their relatively small numbers, their ability to strike at the heart of their enemies' power structures made them one of the most feared organizations of the medieval period. The origins of the Nizari Assassins can be traced back to the political and religious divisions within Islam in the 11th century. The Islamic world at the time was divided between Sunni and Shia factions, with the ruling Abbasid Caliphate and the Seljuk Empire firmly supporting Sunni Islam. However, within the Shia sect, there was further division between the Twelvers and the Ismailis. The Ismailis followed a distinct line of religious leadership, believing in a succession of imams who were the rightful spiritual and political leaders of the Muslim community. Among the Ismailis, a further split occurred when the Fatimid Caliphate in Egypt faced a succession crisis. In 1094, the Ismaili community divided into two factions, one that supported Nizar, the rightful heir to the Fatimid throne, and another that supported his younger brother, al-Mustali. The followers of Nizar became known as Nizaris, and they sought to establish an independent state under their own leadership. This faction was led by Hassan-i-Sabah, a brilliant strategist and theologian who would become the founder of the Nizari Assassins. Hassan-i-Sabah was born in Persia and was highly educated in theology, philosophy, and political strategy. After converting to Ismailism, he traveled extensively and eventually settled in Persia, where he sought to create a safe haven for his followers. In 1090, he and his followers seized control of Alamut Castle, which became the central headquarters of the Nizari state. From this fortress, Hassan-i-Sabah implemented a highly organized system of governance, education, and military training, allowing the Nizaris to operate independently despite being surrounded by hostile powers. The assassins were not a traditional army, but rather a highly disciplined network of operatives, trained to infiltrate enemy strongholds, disguise themselves, and eliminate key figures with precision. Their elite warriors, known as Fida'is, self-sacrificing devotees, were rigorously trained in combat, stealth, disguise, and psychological manipulation. Their missions often required them to live among their targets for months or even years before striking at the right moment. Unlike mercenaries or common assassins, the Fida'is were religiously motivated and believed in the righteousness of their cause. One of the most controversial aspects of the Nizari Assassins was their alleged use of hallucinogenic substances, particularly hashish, to indoctrinate recruits. According to medieval sources, many of which were written by their enemies, young initiates were drugged and taken to a hidden paradise filled with luxurious gardens, flowing rivers, and beautiful women. When the effects of the drug wore off, they were told that they had experienced a glimpse of heaven and that they could return if they carried out their missions faithfully. This legend gave rise to the term hashishin, which later evolved into the word assassin. However, modern scholars believe that these stories were exaggerated or fabricated by their enemies, particularly the Crusaders and the Mongols, to justify their destruction of the Nizaris. While the assassins were undoubtedly skilled in psychological warfare and deception, there is little concrete evidence to support the claim that they used drugs to manipulate their followers. The assassins also employed fear tactics to intimidate their enemies. Rather than always resorting to murder, they would sometimes place daggers on the pillows of their enemies as a warning, letting them know that they could be killed at any time. This strategy was highly effective, as many rulers chose to cooperate with the Nizaris rather than risk assassination. Their reputation for stealth and precision made them one of the most feared forces in the medieval world. The Nizari Assassins carried out some of the most significant political assassinations of their time, often changing the course of history by eliminating powerful leaders. Some of their most famous targets included Nizam al-Mulk, was the powerful vizier of the Seljuk Empire, and one of the first major figures to be assassinated by the Nizaris in 1092. His death created political instability within the Seljuk state, benefiting the Nizaris by weakening their primary enemy. Conrad of Montferrat was the newly elected king of Jerusalem, assassinated by two Nizari operatives disguised as monks in 1192. His death altered the balance of power among the Crusader states. Raymond II of Tripoli was a prominent Crusader lord, assassinated by the Nizaris in 1152 due to his conflicts with their Syrian branch. Several Abbasid caliphs and Seljuk leaders were targeted by the assassins, along with numerous attacks on high-ranking Sunni leaders who opposed their existence. While their assassinations were highly effective in destabilizing enemy factions, they also led to increased hostility towards the Nizaris, ultimately contributing to their downfall. The greatest threat to the Nizari assassins came in the 13th century, when the Mongol Empire, led by Hulagu Khan, launched a campaign to conquer Persia and the surrounding regions. In 1256, the Mongols systematically destroyed the Nizari strongholds, including Alamut, and executed their leaders. The Mongols' superior military power and siege warfare capabilities made it impossible for the Nizaris to resist. The fortress of Alamut was burned, its libraries destroyed, and the assassin presence in Persia was effectively wiped out. Although some Nizari cells continued to operate in Syria, they faced increasing pressure from the Mamluks, who eventually exterminated the last remnants of the Nizari assassins in the 1270s. With their military and political power completely dismantled, the assassins faded into obscurity, and their once feared order ceased to exist as a militant force. Despite their destruction, the legend of the assassins lived on, shaping historical narratives and inspiring popular culture for centuries. Their use of targeted assassinations, espionage, and psychological warfare has been studied as an early example of asymmetric warfare, influencing modern military and intelligence tactics. The very word assassin in English and other languages originates from the name given to them by their enemies. Today, the Nizari Ismaili community, now led by the Aga Khan, has evolved into a peaceful religious and philanthropic group, completely distancing itself from its militant past. However, the memory of the assassins endures, inspiring countless books, films, and video games, most notably the Assassin's Creed franchise, which draws heavily from their history. Whether viewed as fanatical killers or strategic masterminds, the Nizari Assassins remain one of the most fascinating and mysterious groups in medieval history.